Commander Eli Donovan stared at the mission brief with barely concealed contempt. After 15 years of distinguished service in the Interstellar Defense Force, including 3 tours in the Centauri conflict and countless high-risk extractions, he was being reduced to a glorified chauffeur. "With all due respect, Admiral," Eli said, his jaw tight, "I'm a combat specialist, not a diplomatic escort." Admiral Vega's holographic projection flickered slightly. "This isn't a request, Commander. Lady Callister is not just any Avendrian diplomat. She's the niece of High Chancellor Thuros. Her safe passage to the summit is critical to the peace process." Eli ran a hand through his dark hair, streaked with premature gray, a souvenir from years spent in combat zones across the galaxy. "The Avendrians have their own security forces. Why request a human escort at all?" "Politics," Vega said simply. "After the incident at Proxima Station, they're making a show of trust. Don't let appearances deceive you. This mission is as vital to galactic security as any battlefield assignment." 12 hours later, Eli stood at the Lunar Gateway's diplomatic docking bay, watching the sleek Avendrian shuttle connect with the station. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Maya Ortiz, stood beside him, checking her tactical display. "Our ship is prepped and ready," Maya reported. "The Pathfinder has been outfitted with the diplomatic suite as requested, though I still don't understand why we couldn't take a standard military transport." "Because we're playing politics now," Eli muttered. The airlock cycled open, revealing 3 tall, slender figures. Avendrians resembled humans at first glance, but their iridescent skin and elongated features marked them as distinctly alien. 2 were clearly security personnel, but the central figure commanded immediate attention. Lady Callister of the Avendrian Collective stood nearly 7 feet tall, with luminescent copper skin that seemed to shimmer in the artificial light. Her hair, if you could call it that, was a crown of delicate tendrils that shifted color with her movements, currently a deep, annoyed crimson. "Commander Donovan," she said, not bothering to extend her hand in greeting. Her voice was melodic but ice-cold. "I presume you are adequately prepared for this assignment." Eli straightened, meeting her gaze directly. "My team has completed over 200 escort missions without casualty, Lady Callister. You're in capable hands." "So your superiors claim." Her eyes, entirely violet with no visible pupils, narrowed slightly. "I find it curious that your species, barely a century into interstellar travel, presumes to guarantee my safety through the Veil Nebula." Maya tensed beside him, but Eli maintained his composure. "The IDF's familiarity with the region is precisely why your government requested our assistance, my lady. A diplomatic necessity, nothing more." Callister glanced around the docking area with thinly veiled disdain. "Your advanced technology still relies on principles my people mastered generations ago." One of her guards whispered something in their native tongue, earning a slight nod from Callister. "We depart immediately," she declared rather than requested. "I dislike lingering in human facilities. The air filtration is inadequate." Eli gestured toward the adjacent dock. "The Pathfinder awaits your inspection. Your quarters have been prepared according to Avendrian physiological requirements." As they walked, Eli observed her carefully. Beyond her obvious contempt, something else colored her demeanor, tension, perhaps even fear, though she masked it well. Intelligence had suggested internal strife within the Avendrian leadership regarding the upcoming peace talks. Perhaps Lady Callister's assignment to this mission wasn't entirely voluntary. Aboard the Pathfinder, Callister dismissed her security detail back to their shuttle with a command in her native language. Eli raised an eyebrow. "Your guards aren't joining us." "Chancellor Thuros insisted I adapt to your protection methods completely, a show of trust." The way she said trust made it clear how little of it she actually possessed. As Maya led her to the diplomatic quarters, Eli retreated to the bridge. The mission would take them through the edges of disputed space, 14 days of potential danger, all while babysitting an alien princess who clearly despised humans. He had a feeling this would be the longest 2 weeks of his career. 3 days into their journey, the fragile peace aboard the Pathfinder had settled into a cold routine. Lady Callister spent most of her time isolated in her quarters, emerging only for necessary consultations or to use the observation deck during the ship's simulated night cycle when the crew was minimal. Eli found her there just after midnight, staring out at the nebula they were skirting. The swirling cosmic gases painted the viewport with blues and purples, illuminating her features in ethereal light. "Trouble sleeping?" he asked, maintaining a respectful distance. She didn't turn to acknowledge him. Avendrians require less rest than humans. 4 hours is sufficient. Convenient evolutionary advantage. Not evolution, genetic engineering. My ancestors designed themselves for efficiency. She finally glanced his way. Your species still relies on chance mutations and natural selection, remarkably inefficient. Eli leaned against the railing. There's something to be said for a bit of randomness, makes life interesting. Makes it chaotic, she corrected, but her tone lacked its usual edge. The ship's alert system cut through their conversation, a soft chime at first, then building in urgency. "Commander to the bridge," Maya's voice came through the comm. "We have multiple contacts approaching fast." Eli was moving before the message finished. "Get to your quarters and secure the door," he ordered Callista, who surprisingly fell into step beside him. "I'm coming with you. If there's danger, I prefer to see it firsthand." The bridge was tense when they arrived. Maya stood at the tactical station, her face illuminated by the red warning lights. "6 vessels, Commander. They appeared from behind the nearby asteroid cluster. Speed and configuration suggest barren sector privateers." "Pirates," Eli translated for Callista. "Not pirates," Callista said, her voice suddenly tight. "Assassins, they're after me." Eli shot her a questioning look, but there was no time for explanations. "Evasive maneuvers, charge defense systems." The Pathfinder responded smoothly, banking hard to port as the first volley of enemy fire illuminated space around them. The ship shuddered under a glancing hit. "They're faster than I expected," Maya reported, "targeting our engines." 3 more impacts in quick succession sent crew members tumbling across the deck. Eli grabbed Callista's arm to steady her, surprised by the strength in her slender frame as she regained her balance. "Hull breach on Deck 3, the ship's AI announced calmly. "Emergency protocols engaged." Callista moved to a console, her fingers flying over the unfamiliar human interface. "Your shields are configured incorrectly for this type of attack. Allow me." "Stand back," Eli ordered, then reconsidered as he saw the complex adjustments she was making. The shield harmonics shifted, deflecting the next barrage more effectively. "Impressive," he conceded. "Basic Avendrian defensive theory. Your engineers lack imagination." Another explosion rocked the ship, harder this time. The lights flickered, then emergency systems bathed everything in an ominous red glow. "Main engine offline," Maya reported grimly. "They're moving to surround us." Eli studied the tactical display, weighing their diminishing options. The nearby planet, classified as J47, unexplored but habitable, might be their only chance. "Plot a crash descent to the planet's surface. Use the nebula gas for cover." Maya's eyes widened. "Sir, the Pathfinder isn't designed for atmospheric entry under these conditions." "Neither are our pursuers' ships," he countered, "and we have better heat shields." Callista moved closer, examining the planet data. The northern hemisphere shows signs of dense vegetation, better for concealment if we survive the landing. Eli nodded. "Target coordinates locked. All personnel prepare for emergency landing procedures." As the crew scrambled to secure stations, Eli guided Callista to an emergency harness. Their eyes met briefly as he checked the restraints. "Your species has a reputation for surviving against impossible odds," she said quietly. "I hope it's deserved." "Stay alive, Lady Callista, and you can judge for yourself." The Pathfinder plunged toward the planet, pursuing vessels close behind. The ship's hull screamed in protest as atmosphere grabbed them, superheating the outer shielding. 2 enemy ships followed too closely, breaking apart under the strain. Impact alarms blared as the ground rushed up to meet them. Eli's last conscious action was throwing his arm protectively across Callista as the world dissolved into chaos and darkness. He awoke to pain and the hiss of escaping oxygen. Smoke filled the bridge, emergency systems flashing warnings across damaged displays. Beside him, Callista was already free of her restraints, applying pressure to a bleeding gash on Maya's forehead. "Your lieutenant requires medical attention," she said calmly. The medical bay is damaged, but I accessed emergency supplies. Eli unstrapped himself, wincing at what felt like cracked ribs. The rest of the crew. I've accounted for 6 survivors, including us, she replied, her usually perfect appearance now disheveled, iridescent skin smudged with soot, and what looked like her own indigo blood seeping from a cut on her arm. We need to evacuate. The reactor containment is holding but compromised. Outside the shattered viewports, an alien jungle stretched in all directions. Strange, bird-like creatures circled overhead, attracted by the crash. We need to gather supplies and move away from the ship, Eli decided. If any of those vessels survived, they'll be hunting us. As they worked to salvage what they could, Eli noticed a change in Callista's demeanor. Gone was the aristocratic disdain, replaced by focused efficiency as she helped tend to injured crew and catalog survival gear. When they finally abandoned the ship, heading deeper into the alien forest with their wounded, Callista fell into step beside Eli. For the first time, they moved as partners rather than adversaries. You were right about the randomness, she said quietly, glancing back at the smoking wreckage. It does make life interesting. Eli managed a grim smile. Let's hope it keeps us alive long enough to appreciate the lesson. Around them, the alien forest pulsed with unknown dangers, and somewhere above, hunters still searched. But in that moment, human and Avendrian stood as equals, survivors against the odds. By the 3rd day on J47, they had established a makeshift camp in a defensible position, a rocky overhang beside a freshwater stream, surrounded by dense vegetation that provided both concealment and a natural perimeter. Lieutenant Maya Ortiz had regained consciousness but remained weak from her injuries. The other survivors, Communications Officer Jace Porter, Engineer Talia Reeves, and security specialists Marcus Grady and Deven Singh, had formed a tight-knit unit with Eli and, surprisingly, Callista. Eli returned from patrol to find Callista kneeling beside Maya, pressing a strange blue leaf against the lieutenant's forehead. "What are you doing?" he asked, alarmed. "A poultice," Callista replied without looking up. "The cellular structure of these plants contains compounds similar to certain Avendrian healing herbs. It should reduce her fever." Eli knelt beside them, noting the improvement in Maya's color. "How did you know?" Callista's tendrils shifted to a contemplative amber. "I was trained in xenobotany before diplomatic service. It was considered unseemly for one of my station, but I persisted." "Rebellious streak," Eli raised an eyebrow. A faint smile touched her lips, perhaps not unlike your own career choices. Their moment was interrupted by Jace's urgent call from the perimeter. "Commander, movement in the trees, southeastern quadrant." Eli and Callista moved swiftly, joining the others at the edge of camp. Among the violet-tinged foliage, shadows moved with deliberate purpose. "Not wildlife," Marcus whispered, rifle raised. "Too coordinated." 3 survivors from the attack ships made planetfall approximately 20 kilometers from here, Callista said quietly. "I detected their emergency beacon frequency yesterday." Eli turned to her, eyes narrowing. "And you didn't think to mention this?" "I disabled the beacon remotely," she replied, unfazed by his anger. "I calculated we had more time before they could organize a search pattern." Before Eli could respond, a plasma bolt sizzled through the air between them, striking a tree and converting it instantly to ash. Everyone dropped for cover as more shots followed. "So much for your calculations," Eli muttered, signaling Deven and Marcus to take flanking positions. "They shouldn't have found us this quickly unless," Callista's eyes widened, "unless they're tracking me." "What?" She turned her arm, revealing an intricate silver bracelet. "Diplomatic identifier it contains." "A tracking chip," Eli finished grimly. "Get back to camp with the others, I'll hold them off." "They're here for me, not you," she countered, surprising him by drawing a slim blade from her boot, a weapon he hadn't known she carried. "And I'm not defenseless, Commander." Another volley of plasma fire forced them both behind a massive tree trunk, pressed close in the limited cover. "Fine," Eli conceded, "but we move together. Back to camp, gather what we can, and find a more defensible position." They retreated strategically, exchanging fire with their pursuers while working their way back to the others. Talia had already begun packing essential supplies, while Jace supported the still weakened Maya. There's a cave system 2 kilometers north, Devin reported, pointing to his handheld scanner. Deep enough to mask life signs if we can lose them in the forest. Move out, Eli ordered. Marcus, take point. Devin, cover our six, everyone else between. As they navigated the alien forest, the humidity grew oppressive. Strange calls echoed through the canopy, and bioluminescent fungi lit their path in the gathering dusk. The pursuers remained persistent but cautious, aware they were outgunned if not outmaneuvered. An hour into their trek, the forest floor suddenly gave way beneath Eli's feet. He felt himself falling, then Callista's hand closing around his wrist with surprising strength. She braced against a tree, halting his descent into a hidden sinkhole. Their eyes met as she pulled him to safety, something unspoken passing between them, trust, perhaps, or something deeper. Careful, she said softly. Your human weight distribution is poorly suited to this terrain. Are you calling me clumsy? He asked, a hint of humor breaking through the tension. Merely evolutionarily disadvantaged. The teasing lilt in her voice was new. They reached the caves as night fell completely, the alien darkness absolute save for the strange, glowing plant life. Inside, they established a new camp, positioning sensors to warn of approach. With the others resting deeper in the cave, Eli and Callista took first watch near the entrance, sitting side by side in companionable silence until she spoke. You deserve to know why they're hunting me, she said quietly. It's not simply because of my diplomatic status. Eli turned to her, the bioluminescent light casting her features in soft blue glow. I figured there was more to this mission than I was told. The peace talks are genuine, but what I carry with me is more valuable than mere diplomacy. She hesitated. I possess evidence of collaboration between certain Avendrian military leaders and human separatist factions, evidence that could undermine those who profit from our continued conflict. So the attack was from your own people. A faction within our military intelligence, yes. Her tendrils darkened to a deep blue. Chancellor Thoreau suspected betrayal but couldn't identify the source. My mission was both diplomatic and investigative. And you didn't trust us enough to share this information. Can you blame me? She met his gaze directly. I've been raised to see humans as primitive, dangerous, inherently untrustworthy. Yet in 3 days, you've shown more honor than those of my kind who would sacrifice peace for power. Eli was silent for a moment, processing her words. My father fought in the first Avendrian conflict. He came home, changed. I grew up hating your people for what the war did to him. And now, she asked softly, now I'm realizing how much easier hate is when the enemy remains faceless. His hand found hers in the darkness, a gesture of understanding that bridged their worlds. Outside, the alien night pulsed with strange life. Inside, something equally strange and new took root between them, a connection neither had anticipated, forged in danger and honesty. Callista's tendrils shifted to a color he hadn't seen before, a warm, rosy hue that seemed to glow from within. The significance escaped him, but the way her fingers tightened around his suggested it wasn't unwelcome. We should try to reach my ship's emergency beacon, she said finally. If we can broadcast on secured channels, Thoreau's will send extraction. First, we need to deal with our pursuers, Eli replied, and remove that tracker. Her free hand touched the silver bracelet. It's biomechanically bonded. Removal is complicated. Good thing we have time for complicated, he smiled slightly. And apparently I have an Avendrian xenobotanist on my side. For the first time since they'd met, Callista laughed, a melodic sound that echoed gently in the cave. Indeed you do, Commander. Perhaps between your human tenacity and my superior intelligence, we might survive this yet. The teasing was gentle now, wrapped in newfound respect rather than contempt. As the night deepened around them, the distance between human and Avendrian diminished, replaced by something neither had expected to find so far from home. Dawn broke on their 5th day stranded, painting the alien sky in shades of amber and rose. Deep in the cave system, Eli watched as Callista prepared a solution in a makeshift laboratory of salvaged equipment and local flora. Hold still, she instructed, applying the viscous blue liquid to his injured side. 3 cracked ribs had made breathing painful, but under her ministrations, the discomfort was finally subsiding. The molecular structure of these fungi accelerates cellular regeneration, she explained, her fingers gentle against his skin. Not as efficient as our medical technology, but remarkable for a primitive ecosystem. Eli watched her work, struck by the change in her. Gone was the haughty diplomat, replaced by a focused scientist whose tendrils shifted through colors of concentration, violet to azure to a deep, thoughtful green. "Why xenobotany?" he asked. "Seems an unusual choice for Avendrian nobility." Her hands paused momentarily. "My mother was a xenobiologist before her political marriage. She studied interconnected ecosystems, the way different life forms evolved to support one another." A wistful smile touched her lips. She believed there was a lesson there for sentient species as well. "She sounds wise." She was, until she died in a shuttle accident, shortly after advocating for peace with humans. The implication hung between them. Eli covered her hand with his own where it rested on his ribs. "I'm sorry." "It was 15 years ago." She met his eyes. "Her death is part of the evidence I carry linked to the same faction pursuing us now." Their moment was interrupted by Talia's arrival. "Commander, we've modified the communicator. Limited range, but it might reach orbit if there's anyone to hear it." "Good work." Eli pulled his shirt back on, nodding thanks to Callista. "We'll need to reach higher ground. Marcus located a plateau about 3 kilometers east." "The tracker complicates matters," Callista said, lifting her wrist with the silver bracelet. "They'll intercept any transmission and know our location." Eli studied the device. "Can it be shielded temporarily, not removed, just blocked?" Callista exchanged glances with Talia. "Perhaps," the engineer offered. "If we create a localized electromagnetic pulse, it might disrupt the signal long enough to send a message." "But we'd need a power source stronger than anything we salvaged," Callista added. Jace appeared at the cave entrance. "What about the bioluminescent node clusters? They generate electrical current, that's how they light up." "Harvesting them could work," Callista said, her tendrils brightening with interest. "We'd need several dozen, but the electrical potential combined with your transmitter parts." "I'll gather them," Eli decided, standing with a slight wince. "Callista, work with Talia on the disruptor. Jace, help Maya prepare a coded message, something only IDF command would recognize." "I'm coming with you," Callista said firmly. "The toxic compounds in the node clusters require careful handling. Your human skin is more susceptible to chemical burns." Outside, the jungle had transformed in the daylight, less menacing but no less alien. They moved carefully, aware that both the local wildlife and their pursuers posed dangers. "Your pursuers have been quiet," Eli noted as they collected the glowing fungi. "Too quiet." "They're being strategic," Callista replied. "Conserving resources, perhaps gathering intelligence. Vexari assassins are known for patience." "Vexari? I thought they were Avendrian military." "Mercenaries employed by our military intelligence." Her expression darkened. "Elite killers who specialize in untraceable eliminations." As they worked, Eli noticed Callista frequently scanning the forest canopy. "What are you looking for?" "Certain patterns in wildlife behavior. Birds and arboreal creatures react to predator presence." She gestured upward. "The silence in the eastern quadrant is concerning." Eli trusted her instincts. "Let's circle back through the western approach." They had nearly reached the cave when Callista suddenly pulled Eli behind a massive tree trunk. Her body pressed against his as she signaled for silence. Moments later, 2 figures in adaptive camouflage moved past, weapons ready. "Vexari scouts," she whispered, her breath warm against his ear. "The main hunter won't be far behind." They remained motionless, bodies aligned in tense vigilance. Eli became acutely aware of her proximity, the subtle fragrance of her skin, alien yet intoxicating, the warmth where her form melded against his. When the danger passed, neither moved immediately. Their eyes met in the dappled light, and something electric passed between them. "We should return to the others," Callista said finally, her voice uncharacteristically soft. "We should," Eli agreed, but his hand rose to trace the luminescent markings along her jawline. "But I find myself reluctant to move." Her tendrils shifted to that rosy hue he'd seen before, pulsing gently. "Commander." "Eli," he corrected. "I think we're past titles, don't you?" "Eli," she repeated, his name in her melodic accent sending a shiver through him. "This attraction is unexpected." "Unwelcome." Complicated, but her hands betrayed her words, rising to rest against his chest. There are physiological differences. And remarkable similarities, he countered, drawing her closer. The kiss, when it came, was tentative at first, an exploration of the unknown. Her lips were warmer than a human's, the sensation tingling and electric. Then hesitation gave way to hunger, months of tension and days of growing connection crystallizing into something passionate and raw. Callista responded with surprising intensity, her arms twinning around his neck as his hands spanned her waist. Physiological differences became fascinating discoveries. The way her skin seemed to shimmer beneath his touch, how her tendrils wrapped gently around his wrists in instinctive response. When they finally parted, breathless, Eli rested his forehead against hers. "Still think we're too different." Her laugh was low and musical. "Perhaps our species found one area of compatibility." "I'd like to discover others," he murmured, brushing his lips against the sensitive area where her tendrils joined her scalp, drawing a soft gasp from her. "Later," she promised, though reluctance colored her voice. "The others are waiting and danger still surrounds us." Back at the cave, they maintained professional distance, though Eli caught knowing glances from Maya as they prepared the EMP device. By nightfall, they were ready to move to the plateau and attempt communication. Under cover of darkness, the group made their way through the forest. Devin and Marcus took lead positions, while Eli helped Maya, whose injuries still limited her mobility. Callista and Talia carried the makeshift transmitter and EMP components. The plateau rose before them, a natural tower of stone offering a clear path to the stars above. As they climbed, Eli felt a growing sense of foreboding. The night was too quiet, the ascent too easy. Near the summit, Callista suddenly froze, her tendrils flaring a warning red. "Ambush," she whispered. The night erupted in plasma fire, forcing them to scatter for cover. 3 Vexari materialized from concealed positions, their adaptive camouflage shimmering as they moved with lethal precision. Marcus fell first, a precision shot striking him in the chest before he could return fire. Devin dragged him to cover while exchanging fire with the attackers. Talia worked frantically to complete the transmitter setup while Jace provided covering fire. Eli pulled Callista behind a rock formation as plasma bolts scorched the stone around them. "They're jamming our weapons' targeting systems," he growled, his shots going wide. "It's the leader, Vexari Commander Reth," Callista said, eyes scanning for movement. "He wants me alive but cares nothing for the rest of you." "Charming fellow." A new voice called from the shadows, cold, calculating, speaking accented English. "Lady Callista, surrender the evidence and yourself. Your human companions may live if you comply." "Reth," she whispered, fear and determination mingling in her expression. "He'll kill everyone regardless." Eli squeezed her hand. "We need a distraction to activate the EMP and transmitter." Her eyes met his, resolve hardening. "I can draw his attention. He wants me, not you." "Absolutely not," Eli said firmly. "Trust me," she insisted, and in her eyes he saw something he hadn't expected, a warrior's calculation beneath the diplomat's poise. "I am not without resources, Eli." Before he could protest further, she pressed something small and metallic into his palm. "When I give the signal, activate this and the EMP simultaneously." Then she kissed him, fierce and desperate, a promise and possibly a goodbye, before slipping away into the darkness. Eli wanted to follow to protect her, but discipline held him in place. Whatever her plan, interrupting it now could doom them all. He signaled Maya and Jace to be ready with the transmitter as he watched Callista step into a clearing, her figure proud and defiant in the alien moonlight. "Commander Reth," she called, her voice carrying across the plateau. "I am prepared to negotiate terms." A tall, shadowy figure emerged, weapon trained on her. "There are no terms, Lady Callista, only consequences for betrayal." As Reth approached, Callista's tendrils flared brilliant white, the signal. Eli activated both devices simultaneously, sending a pulse of energy across the plateau that momentarily disabled all electronic systems. In that instant of darkness, chaos erupted. Callista moved with unexpected speed and grace, her concealed blade flashing as she engaged Reth directly. The other Vexari, momentarily disoriented by their disrupted tactical systems, were vulnerable to the humans' counterattack. The transmitter hummed to life, broadcasting their coordinates and distress call into the void above. Whether anyone would hear it remained uncertain, but in that moment of desperate action, Eli found himself believing in possibilities that had seemed impossible just days before. As the battle raged around them, he caught glimpses of Callista, no longer just a diplomat or scientist, but a warrior fighting for something greater than herself. In her fierce determination, he saw his own reflection and knew that whatever came next, neither of them would face it alone. The battle raged across the moonlit plateau. Plasma fire illuminated the night in violent bursts as Eli and his team fought with desperate precision. Marcus lay wounded but stable behind cover, while Deven and Jace maintained suppressive fire against the remaining Vexari mercenaries. But it was Callista who commanded Eli's attention. She moved like liquid starlight against the shadowy figure of Commander Reth, her combat training evident in every calculated strike. The Vexari commander had shed his ranged weapon for a vibrating energy blade that hummed with lethal promise as he pressed his advantage of reach and strength. "The noble houses will be disappointed," Reth taunted as they circled each other. "To think the esteemed Lady Callista would die fighting for humans." "I fight for truth," she countered, dodging a sweeping attack. "Something you've forgotten in service to credits and corruption." Eli wanted desperately to intervene, but two remaining Vexari kept him pinned down. Maya was working frantically to boost their distress signal, while Talia attempted to revive their disabled weapon systems. "Commander," Maya called, "I'm receiving a response to our transmission, encrypted IDF protocols." Hope surged through him. "Can you establish communication?" "Working on it," she replied, hands flying over the makeshift console. "Signal degradation is wait, incoming message. Horizon inbound, ETA 17 minutes. The Horizon, an IDF rapid response vessel. Relief was tantalizingly close, yet the immediate danger remained lethal. A cry of pain drew Eli's attention back to Callista. Reth had landed a glancing blow, leaving a scorched gash along her arm. Still, she fought on, her movements becoming more deliberate as she conserved strength. In that moment, Eli made a decision. Signaling Deven to provide covering fire, he vaulted from his position and charged toward the dueling figures, firing his sidearm to force Reth into a defensive stance. The distraction gave Callista the opening she needed. As Reth deflected Eli's shots, she executed a fluid maneuver that brought her inside the Vexari's guard. Her blade found its mark, sliding between armor plates to strike a critical point. Reth staggered, disbelief evident even through his masked features. "You've evolved," he managed, sinking to one knee. "Adaptation is the foundation of survival," Callista replied, her voice steady despite her labored breathing. "A lesson my mother taught me." The Vexari commander reached for a concealed weapon, but Eli was faster, delivering a final shot that ended the threat permanently. The remaining mercenaries, seeing their leader fall, retreated into the jungle shadows, disappearing like ghosts into the night. In the sudden quiet, Eli reached Callista just as her strength wavered. He caught her against him, supporting her weight as her adrenaline ebbed. "Your combat skills weren't in your diplomatic profile," he said softly. A weak smile touched her lips. "A lady must maintain some mysteries, Commander." He helped her to shelter as the others secured the perimeter. Her wound was painful but not life-threatening. The energy blade had cauterized as it cut, preventing serious blood loss. Still, the near miss left Eli shaken in a way countless battlefield experiences never had. "I thought I'd lost you," he admitted as he applied the healing salve she'd created to her injury. Her tendrils shifted to that now familiar rosy hue, curling gently toward him of their own accord. "I did not survive assassination attempts, a ship crash, and hostile wildlife only to fall before seeing what might exist between us." They shared a gentle kiss, mindful of their injuries and the others nearby, yet no less meaningful for its restraint. The 17 minutes passed with agonizing slowness. They treated wounds, reconfigured their communication equipment, and maintained vigilance against potential return of the Vexari. But no further attacks came, and finally the sky brightened with approaching lights, not dawn but salvation. The horizon appeared first as a distant star, then resolved into a sleek rescue vessel as it descended toward the plateau. Its spotlights swept the area, illuminating the battered but unbowed survivors. Commander Alexander Novik, a veteran officer Eli had served with years earlier, led the extraction team. His eyebrows rose slightly at the sight of Lady Callista, so clearly integrated with the human crew, but he maintained professional composure. "Commander Donovan," he greeted. "When your ship disappeared, Admiral Vega feared the worst. The diplomatic corps has been in an uproar." "I imagine so," Eli replied, still supporting Callista. "We have wounded requiring immediate medical attention, and Lady Callista carries evidence of critical importance to both our governments." Aboard the Horizon, the medical team attended to their injuries while Callista secured her evidence cache, data crystals and documents hidden within her diplomatic credentials. As the ship broke atmosphere, returning to the star-scattered void of space, Eli found her in the observation lounge, gazing at the diminishing planet below. "Second thoughts?" he asked, joining her at the viewport. "Many thoughts," she corrected. "About change, adaptation, evolution, about how quickly perspective can shift when survival depends on cooperation." "And about us," he ventured. She turned to face him fully. In the starlight, her iridescent skin gleamed like polished copper, her violet eyes holding depths he was only beginning to understand. "There is no precedent for this," she said. "An Avendrian noble and a human commander, the political implications alone." "I'm not asking about politics," he interrupted gently. "I'm asking about what you want." Her expression softened. "I want to continue discovering those areas of compatibility we spoke of." He took her hand, tracing the delicate patterns that decorated her skin. "Even if it complicates your return to diplomatic service." "Especially if it does." Determination hardened her features. "The evidence I carry will force both our governments to acknowledge the corruption that profits from our continued enmity. Perhaps it's fitting that we embody the alternative." "A living demonstration of peaceful relations," he teased. "Very peaceful," she agreed, stepping closer, her body fitting against his with now familiar ease. "After thorough cultural exchange, of course." "Of course," he murmured against her lips. "Strictly diplomatic." Their kiss deepened as the ship accelerated toward the stars, leaving the untamed world behind but carrying its lessons forward. Around them, space stretched infinite with possibility. 3 months later, the Galactic Summit convened on neutral territory, a space station orbiting the gas giant Calyx VII. Representatives from 12 species gathered to witness the historic accord between humans and Avendrians, ending decades of conflict and establishing new protocols for cooperative exploration and mutual defense. Chancellor Thuros, his ornate robes marking his status among the Avendrian leadership, addressed the assembly with his niece standing proudly at his side. Lady Callista, newly appointed as special envoy for interspecies relations, wore traditional diplomatic attire with one notable addition, an IDF command insignia pinned discreetly near her heart. "Today marks not merely the end of hostilities," Thuros intoned, "but the beginning of something far more significant, a recognition that our differences need not divide us, that they may instead complement and strengthen." In the human delegation, Commander, now Captain, Eli Donovan watched the proceedings with quiet satisfaction. The evidence Callista had carried had indeed exposed the corrupt faction within the Avendrian military, along with their human co-conspirators. The resulting investigations had removed those who profited from continued conflict, opening the path to genuine peace. After the formal ceremony, as delegates mingled in cautious celebration, Eli found Callista in a quiet alcove overlooking the spectacular rings of Calyx. "Impressive speech," he said, joining her at the railing, "though I noticed you omitted certain details of our cultural exchange." Her tendrils rippled with amusement. "Some diplomatic missions require discretion, Captain." "And our current mission?" he asked, his hand finding hers out of sight of the other diplomats. Callista's free hand rose to touch the IDF insignia she wore. "Chancellor Thuros has approved my request for an extended assignment liaising with the Human Exploration Initiative." Hope kindled in Eli's chest. "And Admiral Vega has approved my transfer to command the Pathfinder II. Her maiden voyage launches next month, a joint mission to the SETI Nebula." "How convenient," Callista murmured, her tendrils shifting to that now familiar rosy hue that he'd learned signified affection. "I've always wanted to study the botanical diversity of the SETI systems." The ship does include state-of-the-art research facilities, Eli confirmed, and the captain's quarters are quite spacious. Her violet eyes sparkled with mischief and promise. I look forward to inspecting them thoroughly, Captain. Around them, the diverse representatives of galactic civilization continued their careful diplomatic dance, unaware that the truest symbol of their potential unity stood quietly apart, hands linked across the divide of different worlds. For Eli and Callista, the future stretched before them like the stars beyond the viewport, unexplored, filled with challenges but luminous with possibility. Together, they had survived crash landings and assassination attempts, prejudice and physical differences. Whatever came next, they would face it as they now stood, side by side, neither human nor Avendrian alone, but something new and stronger than either could be separately. Whatever fate had planned in bringing them together, they had made their own choice in deciding to remain that way, guardians not just of each other, but of the fragile, precious peace they had helped create. As the official reception concluded and they prepared to return to their separate delegations, Eli pulled Callista into a shadowed corner for one brief, private moment. Their kiss was a promise, of nights ahead in distant star systems, of challenges faced together, of barriers overcome and new territories explored, both physical and emotional. "Until tonight," he whispered against her ear. Her tendrils curled around his wrist in that instinctively possessive gesture he'd grown to love. "Until tonight," she confirmed, "and all the nights that follow." They parted, returning to their public roles with practiced composure. But to those who knew to look, the connection between them remained visible, a living bridge between worlds, proof that even the coldest animosity could transform into something beautiful when fate's plans aligned with hearts brave enough to embrace them.